If you believe the only way to make more money is to find more time, you're solving the wrong problem. You're never going to get more than 24 hours in a day. So the real question isn't how do I get more time? It's what is my next hour worth? And am I spending it on the highest value opportunity? Welcome to Spaghetti to Strategy. I'm Greg Lawrence, and I'm joined as always by my friend Bill Walker.
Hey everyone, good to see you. How we doing today? We've got a great topic for today. Greg, what are we talking about?
Today we're going to talk about the time value of time.
Love it.
Everybody's feeling time value of money, but let's talk about what is your time worth?
Okay.
One question I think every business owner eventually asks is, why am I working harder than ever, but I'm making less progress, or it feels like I'm making less progress? They could be working nights, weekends, doing all the things 10, 12 hours a day, and yet their profits barely move. They just don't feel like they're making any traction. And I would say the problem usually isn't effort, it's leverage.
So that kind of fits in the saying, work smarter, not harder.
Very much so. These sayings are around for a reason. So let me give you an example.
Okay.
Let's talk about the difference between spending time and let's call it investing time. Uh, every hour can be spent one of a couple of ways. Uh, you could do, let's call it $10 an hour work, right? That would be things like, I don't know, stuff anybody could do, checking emails, filling out paperwork, scheduling, data entry, just, stuff that needs to be done, but anybody could do it. And then let's talk about let's call it $100 an hour work.
Okay.
And that's things that move the business. Things like sales calls, networking, creating content, following up with leads, things like that. That's something that's a little more specialized, right? And it's certainly a better value for your time. And then let's talk about let's jump it up and let's talk about what's called $1,000 an hour work. Things that change your future, building systems, hiring the right people, developing partnerships, creating, this is a huge one, creating recurring revenue, right? Launching a new offer. Things that more often than not are going to require you, the business owner, your time, your attention. You're the one that has the vision. So as we talk about this, like I call it, time value of time, like we said in the intro, you only get 24 hours, all of us. There's not a single person on the planet, no matter how much money Elon Musk gets 24 hours in a day, right? You and I get 24 hours in a day. That's it, capped. No, no more, no less.
So pretty much for all of you who are going, I'll get started on my business when I get more time. If you're waiting for more time, it's never going to happen.
Yeah, yeah, that's going to be a long wait. But I kind of like let's talk about Elon Musk since first person to ever become a trillionaire, even if it was only for a day or two. But
Okay. What are we going to talk
I
about?
don't imagine he spends a lot of time doing $10 an hour duties. He spends his time doing. He probably doesn't even do $1,000 an hour duties. He spends his time doing $1 million an hour duties, right? He
Well,
he definitely is going to leverage his time. I'm sorry, you were saying something?
Well, no, from what I understand, what Elon Musk does, right, because he's the CEO of multiple companies, is he goes to these different companies and all he does is get into a meeting and go, what's the hardest problem you have to solve? So that is your $1 million an hour task. He's like, what's the most complex thing we need to solve? And then that's what he solves. And all
Yeah,
that other stuff, the $1,000 an hour, the $100 an hour, the $10 an hour stuff, is done by other people. He doesn't waste his time doing that.
not at all. So, as a business owner, you need to start identifying what are the things that are going to bring the most money, the most value for your hour. So, what you need to do is figure out what is the most valuable thing you can do with your hours. Um, and let's be realistic. If you're a small business and you're just a one man show or one or two people, there's obviously times when you're going to have to, at this point, do some of those $10 an hour tasks or $100 an hour tasks. And that's fine. I get that. But what we want you to do is we want you to focus on building yourself up to where you don't have to do that. I want you to focus the majority of your time on those $1,000 an hour, let's say, tasks. Because the more you do that, the more you'll bring in massive amounts of money. And then it'll be a lot easier to then hire somebody to do those $10 an hour tasks, those $100 an hour tasks, which then frees up more of your time to continue to focus more and more on those $1,000 an hour tasks. And it's all about, I mean, we can call it time management. Um, a lot of people talk about that, but I really want you to focus on what value you bring to your business for every hour you spend working. Give me your thoughts on this, Bill.
All right, I've got a few thoughts. The first thing is, if you haven't read it or listened to it yet, you need to go get Buy Back Your Time by Dan Martell. And he talks about these, he doesn't really call it the time value of time, but he does break it down into these different tasks. And he's like, how much do you make per hour? And then what are these $10 tasks that you can offload to someone else? So in his opinion, one of the best ways to buy back your time is to get a personal assistant. Get that person to start doing all of those lower level tasks that you have to do. And then here's another fun one, because you said that if you're a solopreneur, you need to start working on building your systems and stuff so you can start making more money, and then you can start hiring people, right?
Oh, yeah.
Yeah. So now we're going to talk about the other end of that. Now you're not trying to replace the $10 tasks. You're trying to replace the $1,000 tasks. And in the book, I think it's The Science of Scaling, by Dr. Benjamin Hardy, he's talking about that when you're looking for these people, to look for super who's to take over a task. And one of the examples he used is the computer programmer. And the difference between a decent programmer that's making, say, 100 grand a year, and then an exceptional one that's making, say, 500,000 a year. And he's like, those superheroes, they don't return, like say a 10x return to your business. They return 1,000x or a 10,000x to your business. So when you can find these people that can accelerate you, then once again, you're decreasing the amount of these lower dollar per hour tasks that you're doing as the business owner, which allows you to focus on the $10,000 tasks, the $100,000 tasks, and the $1 million tasks in leading your business. And every time you grow, once again, I can't remember which Benjamin Hardy book it is, because I've read a bunch of them recently. But if you go get Time is a Tool, 10x is easier than 2x, or The Science of Scaling, you can find all this stuff. All right. So in one of these other books, he's talking about, if you look at your day, right? And Gregg asked you to look at your day and how you're spending every hour of your day, and what's the dollar per hour equivalent to the tasks that you're doing. And then they equated this to the 80-20 rule, that 20% of your time is generating 80% of your income. So his suggestion is find people to take over that 80%. So you can focus on the highest 20%. And then once you do that, now that you're focused on the 20%, then 20% of that time is generating 80% of your income. So once again, you need to find that who to take over that 80%, and it gets you to focus even more. And what happens is over time, you're progressing from the $10 task, the $10 an hour task, the $20 an hour task, the $100 an hour task, the $500 an hour task, the $1,000 an hour task, the $10,000 an hour task, and the $100,000 an hour task. Yeah, this working smarter, not harder. I think that's a really hard concept for entrepreneurs to grasp.
I was going to say, let's look at it this way. Every decision has an opportunity cost. You've got high value work versus low value work. So, for example, you might ask yourself, should I build my own website or should I edit my own website? Yeah, you can do that. You definitely can. And it can take several hours, especially if it's not something that you do all the time.
Man,
Or
it can take days.
yeah, or you can outsource that to somebody else and that becomes a $10 an hour task. You don't spend very much. You might spend $100, $200 to have somebody build or refine your website. but you saved yourself 20, 30 hours of headache trying to figure stuff out and trying to do it. What could you have accomplished in that, 20 hours if you focused on other things? So again, every decision has an opportunity cost.
Absolutely.
Spend time making a logo, answering every email immediately, figuring out software. Just there's so many different things that you could be, I'm not going to say wasting, spending your time on. But like I said, every one of those decisions has an opportunity cost. So how much money did you bring in if you're spending 4 hours trying to figure out a new software program? How much money did you bring in if you were editing your website? You didn't. You saved yourself spending maybe $100 and you spent 10 hours doing that. What if you'd spent that 10 hours reaching out to new customers, implementing a new offer? The list is endless, and this is what we really need you to focus on, because believe me, when I talk about this stuff, guilty time and time again over my career, guilty of doing tasks that I had no business doing, spending time I had no business spending on things that I should have outsourced to somebody else and used my time for far more valuable things, right? So this is where a lot of entrepreneurs, we lose money, not because we're lazy, we're not, but we unknowingly trade high value work for low value work, and we've really got to stop doing that. So you might say there's four ways to increase. Well, before I move on, thoughts, Bill. I don't.
Yeah, so and I actually did a video and covered that just a little bit. One of the problems, one of the major problems that creatives have is the inability to choose. And so one of the things that I talked about is for every time you say yes, then you have to say no to something else. And so that's the opportunity cost. And so if you're saying yes to 5 things, the opportunity cost is the inability to complete any one of those things completely timely and the best that you're able to do because you're spread so thin.
And you
And
said no to 5 things that were probably more profitable.
yeah, you've had to have said no to 5 things. So now if we're back to Greg's example of building a website, by you choosing to spend 40 or 60 or 80 hours working on your website, you said no to prospecting, so you can't make sales calls. Not only that, not only can you not actively look for leads, since you haven't found any leads, you can't try to sell any leads. Like you can't talk to anyone and see if you can solve the problem because you're spending all your time working on a website. And once again, as Gregg said, if you're a solopreneur, we understand it because when you're first starting out, you have to do it, right? And as I've said 1,000 times talking to Gregg about marketing, you got 3 choices. You do it, you pay somebody to do it, or there's a hybrid where you both do it. In this case, if you have $10 an hour backup, so let's just say for quick numbers, you need to make a minimum of $5,000 a month to survive. Now, let's say that you're making $6,000 a month. That other $1,000 should be going to pay someone to take off some of those $10 an hour tasks.
Yep.
I mean, think about it. If you have, and let's be a little more generous than the $10 an hour task. Let's call it a $20 an hour task. At $20 an hour and that extra $1,000, you can offload 50 hours of work a month. I mean, think about it. That's more than one calendar work week that can now be reinvested into income producing activities.
And can you imagine what would the next month look like if you made $6,000 and then that next month you offloaded 50 hours of work that didn't really bring in a lot of money? You offloaded that to somebody else, and now you have 50 more hours to prospect, to sell, to cultivate leads. There's no way you're not going to increase your income the next month. You're going to go from 6,000 to 7 or 8, right?
Maybe 9.
Yeah.
I mean, you've got a whole week's worth of work.
more than 12 weeks, but yeah, absolutely. So, I mean, if if you're saying you're making $6,000 in a month, that comes out to 1,500 a week. Well, if you just offloaded more than a week, you mathematically should expect an increase of $2,000, right? That's money well spent. Would you
So now,
trade 1,000 for two?
yeah. And so now you're at $8,000 a month. Now, if you want to get super crazy, we'll let you keep $1,000, but take that other $1,000 that you made that's in excess and put that into another $20 an hour employee. So you can offload another 50 hours of $20 an hour work. And if you're saying, okay, well, the other dude's taking care of all my $20 an hour work, then you can offload $50 an hour work. Now
Yep.
you're only going to get 20 hours out of that instead of 50, but that's okay. That's 20 hours that you've now bought back to do $1,000 an hour work.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, let's talk. So we call this the time multiplier, right? There's basically four ways to increase your income. You can work more hours.
Mhm. Which we don't want you to do.
No, you can charge more. There are times when that's appropriate, but there's going to be a limit to what you can charge. You can try to help more customers. That's a good one. I mean, increase your customer base. Or you can multiply the value of every hour. And that's really where the magic happens. That's where the freedom comes in. You multiply the value of every hour. So, number three, help more customers. That's really the goal, right? I mean, if you want to make more money, you got to service more clients. But if your time is spent doing other things, it's kind of hard to do. So, if you multiply your time, like we just talked about, and you bring other people on, whether it's a full time employee or outsourcing certain things and tasks to other people, if you free up 10 hours a week doing these $10, $20 an hour tasks, that's 10 hours a week you can now focus on helping more customers. And that is what directly brings in the money. So that's what we want to
Absolutely.
focus on. So, Bill, let me ask you a question. Looking back over your career, what's one thing? I mean, for me, I could name hundreds, but let's focus on one thing that you spent way too much time doing that you should have or could have delegated or offloaded to somebody else.
Oh, this is a tough one for salespeople. So I spent a decade in lending, and I could have hired an assistant to take care of all my paperwork for me, but I never did because I didn't trust anyone to do it correctly. And I have a friend right now who's a financial advisor who's trying to make that next jump in income. And he has an assistant who stinks, and he's still doing all of the work because every time he delegates, it gets screwed up. And so me as a lender, I'm like, you know what? These are my clients. If it gets screwed up, it's on me. It's not on them. And so I would never outsource any of that. And it's funny. I think it's Dan Martell who says it. 80% done by someone else is 100% not done by you.
Yep.
And even with those mistakes, if an assistant would have got 80% of it correct, so I only had to do a little bit of it, one, I could have trained better. Two, I could, if it was just irreparable, find somebody who would do it and do it correctly. But then I could have been out there generating more business instead of doing my own stinking paperwork. And I did all my own paperwork. I never let anybody touch my paperwork because I'm like, no, this is my loan and I can't have it screwed up. And so yeah, that's the biggest one.
Yeah, I remember when I first started my first carpet cleaning company, it was just me. And had my cell phone, so run my ads. I'd be out doing a job, driving to a job, on a job, phone would ring. I'm answering it. The equipment is loud. I'm trying to answer some questions. I don't usually have my calendar right in front of me, so I'd get their name and information and say I'd call them back. And in the course of a job, if I have to stop every 30 minutes to answer a call or deal with something, that's problematic. But I made it work until I finally decided, okay, let me see if I can afford to hire somebody. And so I hired somebody to answer the phones and be at the desk at the office. And it was so transformative because not only were they there answering the calls, they had the schedule, it's professional. They weren't, there wasn't noise in the background. They could answer their questions undistracted. They could look at the schedule. They could book the job. And while they weren't taking calls, they could be sending out email reminders or sending out follow up calls or creating. We had a system of doing, calling previous customers after a certain amount of time to see if they're ready. They could do a whole lot more that would help bring in new business so that I could go out and do the job. And then eventually I got to where I could hire somebody to do the jobs and we could do twice as many. And anyway, the point is, yeah, you got to learn to multiply the value of every hour, period.
Yeah.
Um,
So let me
so
give one thing for real time in our real lives today. One of the things I've been talking to Greg about is the first person that we need to get is a video editor, because that'll free up
yeah,
my time so I don't have to edit these videos when we're done. And, I'm telling Greg, I'm like, well, if I can offload all that, have someone else take care of the shorts. And I use Opus Clip to take all these long videos and turn them into shorts. And then that's how we publish all the shorts. And that saves a ton of time. Now, even with the shorts, I still spend a little bit of time editing it, maybe moving the text box around, maybe adding some AI generated B roll because I don't have any already recorded. But if I can, when we're ready, we will offload this to a video person to take care of it for us so we can get back to creating more content,
exactly.
which is what
Yeah,
we
he
want to
spends
do.
a lot of time doing the editing. So, yeah, that's our
Yeah.
top priority.
Yeah. We'll be able to spend more time in production and preparing and researching and doing all this stuff for us to help others succeed when we don't, well, at least for me, when I don't have to spend so much time editing. So, but we've already talked about it. This show's only 2 months old. So it's not
Yeah.
like it's bringing in any money yet. And that's okay. I don't mind doing it because we need to. But in the future, oh yeah, we're going to offload the video editing so we can get back to the $1,000 an hour activities.
I want to give everybody watching this a challenge. I want you to write down, think about everything you did yesterday and write down the tasks you did and then label them low value, medium value, high value, or 10, 100, 1000, whatever, however you want to categorize it. And then seriously think about it. Ask yourself, if I eliminated or delegated just one or two of these low value tasks every day, what could I accomplish with that time that I saved? And this is really, you need to shift your mindset. This is really where we need to get our thoughts moving to is what is my time worth? And you need to understand your time is most likely worth far more than you are giving yourself credit for. A lot of times, especially if we're starting out and we're struggling, we might not have a very high opinion of what our time value is worth. You need to understand it's worth a lot more than you're giving yourself credit for. So you just need to identify what are the high value tasks? What are the things that will propel the business forward, make me more money, bring on more clients? That's what you need to focus on. That's where your time is most valuable. That's where you need to be assigning the bulk of your activities. And then, as much as you can afford to offload any of those low value tasks to somebody or something else, do it. But don't do it and then take that time you saved and sleep
Do
in
the
or
same
go to
thing.
sleep, right? Or just, if you're paying somebody to do $10 an hour tasks, you take those hours you saved. Like, our time is currency, just like money is currency. You just saved yourself the currency of time. Spend that time wisely doing things that will propel you forward.
And a final thought, you should already be tracking your activities. How can you possibly know what's working and what doesn't work if you don't track your activities? And if you're tracking your activities, then doing Greg's challenge should be easy. You should be able to identify those low value tasks and the medium value tasks and the high value tasks from your already tracked data. And then you can evolve and make changes.
So here's my closing thought. Success isn't about finding more time, it's about creating more value with the time you already have. So whenever you're about to start a task, ask yourself, and this is, think about this. If my time were worth $1,000 an hour, would I still be doing this task myself? So every time you're about to start to do something, pause and think, if I was $1,000 an hour person, is this something I would spend my time on? If the answer is yes, then you're in the right spot. If the answer is no, you need to figure out how to, as quickly as possible, offload those tasks to something or somebody else. So,
And just for those of you who are curious about $1,000 an hour person, that's $2 million a year as a rough thing based on a 2,000 hour work year. $2 million bucks. So if you're making $2 million a year, are you going to be answering your own email?
probably not.
Something to think about.
Yeah.
All right, everyone, if you found some value in this, please subscribe, comment below on your low, medium, and high value tasks, and share this with one entrepreneur that needs to see this video. And we will see you in our next episode.